I don't know, what do you say? Shall we reveal the mysteries of the female life?
I don't know, perhaps we should leave the veil which is drawn over it untouched.
Welcome to the 7th episode of the Two Retired Homeschoolers, and the very first episode where we review something other than a book. Today's episode is going to be on the 1994 adaptation of Little Woman. For those of you who are not familiar with the story of Little Woman, basically, so the book was published in 1868. It takes place in Concord, Massachusetts. So the story takes place during and a little bit after the Civil War. And it centers around the March family. So the director her name was Gillian Armstrong, and she's actually an Australian historical drama and documentary director, which is pretty interesting because she really aimed to make this movie like very historically correct for the time period and the place. So that's pretty cool. It also won 3 Academy Awards. Winona Ryder, who played Jo, won Best Actress for it. The movie also won the Best Costume Design Award and the Best Original Score Award. It earned $95 million at the box office compared to the $15 million it costed to make. And an interesting fact, it took them 12 years to find a studio to actually start producing it because no one thought it would be successful. Everyone thought it would be far too boring. Its release date was December 25th, 1994, which is appropriate.
It was released
It
on
was released
Christmas.
on
Oh, it
Christmas.
is a Christmas
Oh,
movie.
I know. The film was adapted several different times. The very first time it was adapted was in 1917, and I've never heard of this, but it's what we call a lost film. Like, we have no records of it. Like, there's no known recording of that movie. All we have are 2 different images from it that you can find online. So they call it a lost movie, which is really peculiar. Okay, so to give you some background on the actors. So again, Winona Ryder was the main actor who played Jo. Beth was played by Claire Danes. She's also really famous. She was Juliet in the Romeo and Juliet movie, and also she played the main female role in Stardust. And no one's really heard of that, but it's a really good movie, and I've watched it. And she was 15 during the time that they filmed the movie. So Amy was played by Kirsten Dunst, who played Mary Jane in Tobey Maguire's Spider-Man. And an interesting fact, Natalie Portman actually read for the role as well, but she was unknown at that time, and Kirsten Dunst ended up getting it. But she was 12 during the time that they recorded it, which was the exact age of the actual Amy in the book. So that was pretty cool. And then Meg was Trini Alvarado, I think is how you say it, and she was a New York stage actress, actually, and she was 27 when they filmed it. And then Laurie he was played by Christian Bale, who is also really famous. And he, interestingly enough, is an English actor. For some reason, I always assumed he was an American actor. But he was 20 years old when they filmed Little Woman. This was Rebecca's first time watching it. I have watched this movie every year for as long as I can remember around Christmas time. And it is one of my all-time favorites.
It was a good story, and it just, I don't know, it had the right vibes. And like the best thing about the book, I think what makes the book such a classic, even above Louisa May Alcott's other books, which are also really good. I think what makes the story so good is the dynamic between the sisters, and they pretty much nailed that in the movie.
Mm-hmm. If you guys didn't know, I have 4 sisters, no brothers. Rebecca has 2 sisters, no brothers. And I think part of why this movie is so near and dear to my heart is that, like, it did kind of nail it. What do you think was, like, realistic about the sister dynamic?
Like them all piling into the same chair to hear one of them read her thing, or them all just like laughing together at their own jokes, and are just close with each other in a way that they aren't with any other person in their lives.
Yeah. And I think they got the, like, the age rules or, like, the placement of their ages really well. Like, especially with Amy, she was such a little sister. And then, like, Meg being the oldest ones, like, there's a scene where, like, Amy wants limes for her school to be cool. And Meg, like, gives her hard-earned money that was very scarce to go get limes. It is such an older sister thing to do. And then, like, Jo, the second oldest, her relationship with Amy was pretty spot on, I feel like. And then Beth, Like the third child, like the middle child, I don't know, like just being the sweet, like, peacemaker. No one really has qualms with her or her with anyone else.
That's not how the middle child is in my family.
Well, I see Emily more as a second oldest child, not as a middle child. Although I guess she technically is both. Maybe it just more fits my family dynamic.
Well, I liked Amy in particular. She's definitely a brat, and the actress made her lovable as well as a brat.
Yes. When Jo gets mad at Amy after Amy burns her book because Amy's mad that Jo, like, won't let her go to the ball and is, like, making her do her homework. As a kid, especially, that scene was, like, so scary to me. And so vivid. If ever anything happened like that between me and my sisters, like, that would have been a very scary situation for me. Not because, like, my sisters are violent, but just because, like, them getting mad at me at that level.
That's funny. I've always placed myself in Jo's position in that scene.
Yeah, because you're an older sister. You wouldn't know what it's like to be a younger sister like that. And I'm talking about my older sisters. Like, my younger sister, not the same thing.
Right, of course.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, I don't even know what would be an appropriate reaction on Jo's part in my mind. The fact that she got that mad at Amy just isn't even enough to me.
Really?
Like, if you burned my novel that I was working on, like, there's nothing you could, like, I don't even know how you would express the level of anger.
See, that's what I was saying. Like, that scene is very intense, and Jo gets, like, she physically attacks Amy. And doesn't, like, hurt her, but, like, is, like, shaking her and, like, screaming at her, you know? And so I feel like that's what I would envision it being like exactly, and that's why I like the scene. And it's interesting because in the 2019 version, like, Amy's like, yes, I burned your book, like, coming out and admitting it outright and being proud of the fact that she did because she was so mad. And in the 1994 movie, it's like Amy's, like, really, really scared and kind of nervous as Jo finally walks in and she's like, oh gosh, this is about to go down. And, like, just being like, it wasn't me. So I really liked that scene just because of the realisticness of it, and I thought the dramaticness was very appropriate. Okay, so Beth's death. This is the only movie that makes me cry literally every single time during a certain scene.
Did you cry while you were watching it?
I was kind of tempted to, but I didn't. So
okay.
That was, like, the first time I haven't cried.
I'm sorry to make you break your record.
It was such a golden record and you broke it. But yeah, Beth's death is very well done. Another thing about Claire Danes is, like, she has a very interesting style of acting where it's, like, usually good acting involves being rather subtle because humans in real life aren't, like, super overly dramatic and expressive like you would do on stage or something like that. So when you have a camera up in your face, you need to be more subtle and realistic. But Claire Danes, like, she infuses so much emotion into her facial expressions, and it doesn't look weird. Like, she, like, does it in a way where it's like, this is the way it's supposed to be, which is something very unique about her.
She also communicates her emotions through her movements, like the movement of her hand and body and feet. It's very interesting to watch.
She's very expressive.
And it fits Beth very well.
Yeah.
You know, I thought she did great. And especially in the scene where she was dying, like her and Jo's last conversation, I really liked that.
Yeah, I loved it where they had Jo, like, turn away to close the windows because the wind blew them open, and then, like, she's just staring out the window for a while and, like, turns around and Beth's gone. It's, like, literally the saddest thing in the world. And the way, like, the death affected the family and the family's, like, reaction to it, like, I can't imagine anything worse than having a sister die, you know?
Mm-hmm.
So they did that really well.
Yeah. They're still a loving family, but, like, there's, like, a desolateness, like, in the next few scenes.
Yeah.
I liked the mom's acting, too.
Oh, yeah, she did a really good job. I could never envision Mrs. March any other way than the actress did in this movie. Like, she did such a good job.
She did an amazing job, I agree. And especially compared to the one in the 2019 version. Like I said, her acting style was, whenever she has any sort of emotion to display, she scrunches up her face and wrings her hands. That's all she does.
Yeah. And the movie, okay, so you were saying you didn't like how much the movie focused on Beth's death and the lead up to it and the
No,
aftermath.
I'm talking about the 2019 movie. I liked this movie. I thought this movie did Beth's death well.
Oh, okay, okay. Yeah, I don't even remember Beth's death in the 2019 one.
Well, that's funny because it took up like a whole half of the movie.
Okay, because when you said that and I thought you were talking about the 1994 one, I was like, what are you talking about? That's like the best part.
No, I like it in this movie. I thought it was good. It was like in the book. That scene in the book was the first scene that ever made me cry when I read a book.
Oh. Well, see, you understand in your own way. The first time she got sick with scarlet fever and just like the pensiveness of the situation and everyone's reaction, and then she got better, and then like everything was better, like everyone's mood changed. They did that super well. And then the second time, everyone was kind of like, okay, this is probably going to be it. And then it wasn't, and then like there was still hope, but it was just so sad. But it wasn't like the kind of dark, depressing sadness where it's like this is just the end of everything, you know.
Which is how I kind of felt the 2019 was. I think specifically because they overlapped the scarlet fever in the past with the death in the present, and so it just stretched on really long, and you'd go back to the scenes, and even the happy scenes couldn't be happy anymore because you're juxtaposing them with the sad scenes.
Well, and in the 1994 movie, there was a line where Beth was like, if God wants me with him, there's none that will stop him. And it was just like the way Beth was about it and the way everyone was reacting, it was just kind of like, even though it was like literally the saddest thing in the world, it was in a way like bittersweet because you almost felt like good about Beth moving on to the next chapter of her life. Like she basically phrased it like, my whole life I've enjoyed living at home and I've really enjoyed the way things are, but this is like now I'm finally going on my own adventure because you guys have all moved off and done your own things and I've kind of just stayed behind, and this is like finally me stepping into the next thing and it feels right, you know? And that's why I think it's like really like a very touching and beautiful scene. Okay, and the next favorite scene, which is my personal favorite in the whole movie, I'm calling it the stairwell scene. So I explained this to Rebecca earlier, but I'll re-explain it. It's basically the scene where the Mr. March finally comes back home after being at war for a really long time, and I think it was that night they had really established their relationship, Meg and John Brooke, and Laurie was about to move off to college. Like it was that point before everyone's life was going to change, and it was like the sort of change that happens where like things are never going to be the same. Like they're never going to be kids again. They're basically all growing up. And Jo is just like sitting in the stairwell watching it all happen, and everyone's singing Christmas songs and being super happy, and just she's just like sitting there happy, but also like you could tell like she's like experiencing change, which I've happened in my like I've experienced this in my own life with my sisters going off to college. Like I could feel exactly what she was feeling, and it's a very like very small and like it's not a scene that people think about when they think of the movie. But I love the music that goes with it. And then that Laurie has like two wine glasses in his hand and walks by and he's like, isn't it wonderful, Jo? And she was like nodding. And I don't know. I just love that scene. And then, so there's this part of the movie where Jo needs to afford a train ticket, I think it was. And in order to do so, because the Marches were very poor and didn't have any money, she basically like chopped off her hair and sold it. And later she's like crying in the night, and Beth comes over and is like, are you thinking about father? Because he's off at war. And she's like, my hair. And it's literally the best scene ever. Okay, what do you think of Winona Ryder versus, I forgot her first name, but Ronan.
Saoirse Ronan.
And the two actresses that play Jo in the 1994 versus the 2019 movie?
Honestly, I thought they were both good. Honestly, Saoirse Ronan comes across as a little bit wiser and more and having more self-control than the Jo I remember from the book. Because like she's a 15-year-old, and Winona Ryder I thought played her a little more to my specifications. You know what I mean? I don't think that Saoirse Ronan did a bad job. I think that I like Winona Ryder's interpretation better.
As far as it lining up with the book, yeah. Yeah, I also thought Winona Ryder was good for the role. Meg was supposed to be this, like, gorgeous beauty, and Jo was supposed to be, like not as pretty. Not, like, ugly.
She's gorgeous, though.
And
That's something I thought, like, they always do that. The characters are supposed to be, like, either not pretty or not pretty in an obvious way, and they just make them gorgeous.
Yeah.
And I thought Winona Ryder was gorgeous.
Yeah, oh, she definitely was. And I think she was prettier than even the character who played Meg. But in the newer movie, like, and don't get me wrong, Ronan is perfectly pretty, but she's not, like, a glamorous beauty like Winona.
That's true. I liked the character she played, and her appearance was good, but she didn't quite match my idea of Jo.
Meg in the newer movie, I didn't love, but she was very, very pretty, so they nailed that.
Yep, I didn't like her acting.
Yeah, I didn't like
but
her
appearance was very good.
And she's a good actress. Like, she's great for some roles, but not for that one. And I also thought that the actresses that played the four sisters in the new movie just did not look alike. Like, they did not look like sisters, even remotely.
Oh, and in the 1994, they definitely look like sisters.
They look like they could
did a
be
good
sisters,
job.
yeah. They all have that, like, same brand of beauty, I feel like. So, yeah, I liked how the 1994 Jo was a little more, like, naive and kind of childish, although she was, like, very much a good person. Like, she grew up in the March family, where they're all great people. And the newer one, I agree. Like, she was good, and she brought an interpretation that was unique and fitting in its own way, but she wasn't the Jo in the book, so.
Yeah, she just had a little more worldly wisdom than you would have expected.
Well, and I thought she was very rash, especially when she was mad at Friedrich. It was very dramatic.
Which one?
The newer one.
I don't even remember. That Friedrich was a blot.
I can't even envision him in my mind's eye. I completely forgot him.
Oh, I can envision him, and it's awful. He doesn't look right.
Oh, wait. Oh, my gosh, I remember. He was the worst. He was the worst.
He was the worst. I hated how he was acted. It was nothing like the character was supposed to be. He didn't look older than her at all. Sure, I don't want her marrying an ancient man, but can he at least be a little older than her, like, so that it doesn't make sense for him to be the same age as her with all his experiences in life.
Mm-hmm.
And oh gosh, like, their friendship was treated so weirdly because they wanted to make it, like, the ambiguous ending at the end. Like, did she get together with him, or was that just in the story? Yeah, no. Because of it, I think they didn't really want his character to be the way that it is supposed to be. And he was the worst, and I just, the Mr. Bear in 1994 that we just watched, he was good.
Yeah, I think he did a good job with the role. He was, like, consistent with what I imagined Bear to be like.
Yeah, he's very, like, gentle and caring and wise.
Kind of a nerd in his own way. Professor-like.
And, like, very awkward, but not awkward in this, like, unself-confident way.
Yeah.
Like, the one in the new one, it was like he had no self-confidence. He was just, like, treading on eggshells, kind of. And this guy, like, he knows what he's doing in life. He has self-confidence. And passion. And he's just so much more attractive because of that. Just, like, not only as a love interest, but just as a person.
Yeah, he was much more of a solid human being. And I, like, looked at him and I was like, this is a great guy. Like, he's a genuinely good human being. And you don't get that with the newer Frederick.
No, you're like, who is this
You're just kind of repelled. Yeah. Okay. And I'm really interested to hear, like, your thoughts on Christian Bale versus Timothée Chalamet.
I liked both their interpretations of the character. Timothée Chalamet was less painful to watch because of the way he chose to interpret how Laurie would deal with his moody teenager emotions. Mm-hmm. Christian Bale, though, his interpretation was valid and quite funny. Like, the proposal scene, it was so hard not to cover my face while I was watching it.
I love Timothée Chalamet. Like, everything I've seen him in, he's done a great job. He also is very, very unique looking.
I think the way he looks lines up with my picture of Laurie quite well. Like, slightly delicate, but sort of handsome.
Just kind of, like,
boy.
Wild looking.
Yeah, he definitely has, like, his own unique energy.
Right. And I think that makes him good for a lot of different roles, and especially in Marvel movies where it's like, you gotta be a strange person. But in, like...
Is he in Marvel movies? Or do you just always bring up Marvel movies?
No, it's a goal of mine. I have to bring up Marvel in every episode. If I don't, it's, like, ruined. But yeah, no. But for, like, a romantic, sentimental, warm, very wholesome movie, not to say Timothée Chalamet isn't wholesome, it's just, like, he just kind of fell out of place. I didn't actually love him for the role of Laurie.
So you think his acting range is limited? You think he can't really do the normal person. He can only do the oddball character successfully.
I don't know about that. I just don't think he was great for the role of Laurie.
Well, Laurie's the only role I've seen him in, and I quite liked him. Christian Bale, on the other hand,
Christian Bale.
I also liked.
Yes.
I thought they were both good interpretations.
Christian Bale is one of my favorite actors. And Christian Bale also, like, he usually takes on pretty dark roles in movies, like movies I wouldn't watch. But he really nailed the part of Laurie, in my opinion, especially, like, the silliness and his chemistry with the actress who played Jo. Like, I thought he did a really good job. And his moody teenagerness is literally the best. Okay, so the 1994 movie was the only one who had two different actresses play Amy because, again, she was the youngest sister, so she's really the one who grows up the most because, like, the second half of the book takes place 4 years later. So they did have two different actresses for her, and then the 2014 movie, just like every other of the movie adaptations, had the same actress.
What the heck? Amy's only 16 in the second half of the book?
Yeah, that's kind of creepy, isn't it?
Yeah. That's not right.
Well, remember, like, when Laurie and Amy were in the carriage together because, like, she had to go away so she wouldn't get scarlet fever, and she was just this little girl, and Laurie is, like, this older teenager, almost a man, and Amy's like, I've never been kissed. I don't want to die before I've been kissed. I've been waiting my whole life for this, and what if I miss it? And Laurie is like, tell you what, I promise to kiss you before I die. And I guess that's a foreshadowing of their future marriage, but it's weird. One of the things I love about these movies is they include some of my absolute favorite just actors and actresses. Like, I really like Claire Danes. Winona Ryder's great. I mean, I haven't seen her in anything else, so it's not like I'm like, oh, Winona Ryder. But Christian Bale, then Timothée Chalamet, and Florence Pugh. I love Florence Pugh with all my heart.
Little Women 2019 was the only thing I've seen her in, but I thought she was amazing.
She was in Marvel.
She was my favorite part of the movie.
But yeah, so the younger Amy, who was Kristen Dunst, who also played Mary Jane in Spider-Man, like, that's who I think of when I think of Amy from the 1994 movie. A, because she gets the most screen time, and B, because Samantha Mathis, I think is how you say it, who played the older Amy, I really don't like her interpretation of Amy. In fact, I think she was the only person who took on a role that I was just like, I don't like this. Florence Pugh, I think, was a very interesting choice, the 2019 movie. Like, I would never have thought in a million years, oh, let's make Florence Pugh Amy. Especially since her voice is so, like, very low. And to play a little girl, like, that had to be hard. And it didn't look right, in my opinion.
He did a good job playing the younger character where there's only so much you can do to make a woman in her 20s look like a 12-year-old or sound like a 12-year-old. But she was convincing if you didn't think about it. You know what I'm saying? Her acting was good. The casting choice was weird. However, as older Amy, I think she completely nailed Amy's quiet dignity and self-contained, like, just... Amy is so self-controlled and contained and ladylike and dignified in a good way. As an adult, yeah. And she's my favorite character in the book. And so, I don't know. In my opinion, Florence Pugh played her perfectly. Like, that's what Amy is supposed to be like. Which kind of casts the Amy in this version further into the shade, because she's just kind of emotionless instead of
very aloof and kind of in her own world.
Yeah, she's aloof and emotionless instead of self-controlled and dignified, and there's all the difference in the world between those two things.
Yeah. I think what makes Florence Pugh's acting so great is that, like, she's very realistic. Again, I thought she was great as an older Amy. I don't think she, like, her physical appearance was what I would imagine Amy to be like from the book or even from that time period.
Really?
Yeah, I don't know.
How can someone's physical appearance not be from a time period?
That's a good question. I don't know. I just think of her... The Amy I think of as more dainty looking, and Florence Pugh is more, like, fit bodybuilder in my mind. There are some people I'm like, yeah, I can't see you in this time period. Like, you definitely belong in today's world. But yeah, what I love about Pugh's acting is that she's just very... It doesn't feel like she's acting. It just feels like she's that person in that situation saying those things, and she's being very real. And maybe that's because the roles she takes on are usually people who aren't like, I don't like overly dramatic or out of touch with reality. Like she takes on roles of sensible people, and she's very good at playing those.
I think it's a sign of especially good acting skills when you can take on the role of a sensible person, which is so much less immediately interesting and entertaining than a more out there personality, and make that person interesting and say your lines in a way that a normal person would say them, and yet it's emotionally impactful for the audience. I think that's actually a sign of a really good actor. And that's what she does. Like, she's just utterly convincing as the sensible person.
Right.
I would like to see her in more things.
Yeah, she's very good. Okay, so let's talk about the different love relationships in this book. So I guess it would be appropriate to start off with Jo and Laurie, 1994. I think they had, like I said, they had great chemistry, and it was really a perfect choice as far as the roles and the actors that filled them, because like you could see, like, I can totally see how Laurie would fall in love with Jo, and how Jo, because she's smart, would be like, this isn't the best idea, although you are, again, like my dearest friend. And they definitely, like, were very good at portraying the love between them as simply friends, and why Laurie took it farther. And then after Laurie marries Amy, like, they go back to being really close friends, and it's, like, really cool to see that come full circle, and that the fact that they're able to, like, do that. This movie specifically, I think, and this is one of the things that I think the 2019 movie did better, even though I love the 1994 movie significantly more. I think the transition between Jo and Laurie kind of being a thing to Jo and Friedrich, and then Laurie and Amy being a thing, was very poorly done.
I mean, the transition with Jo, and Jo from rejecting Laurie to accepting Friedrich, was much better in the 1994.
Okay, yeah. Yeah, it's more on
But
Laurie's side.
the transition from where Laurie fell in love with Amy was so much better in the 2019 version.
Goodness.
In this one,
yes. Yeah, how did you like, or what did you think about Laurie, like, because he changes a bit and is a bit worse off after he's moved off and gone to college away from the marches. Like, how do you think of Christian Bale's interpretation of that, and how he treated Amy as a result?
I don't understand why Amy fell in love with him. He was just kind of a scoundrel who was like, yeah, I'm still halfway in love with your sister, but I'm going to kiss you. Remember, I said I was going to kiss you before you died when you were 12? Remember? and he doesn't, like, say he's going to... Like, okay, the scene was so weird. She's, like, standing 4 feet away from him with her back to him, and he's just leaning against the tree, and she's like, yeah, you're a terrible person. I don't like you. And he's like, so reform me. Just what? It was weird. It was just weird and stupid.
Yeah. I loved the way Timothée Chalamet... That was my favorite scene in the 2019 version, where he's like, what? Fred Vaughn, everybody, and throws up his wine in the air.
Yeah, that seemed a little more in line with Laurie's impulsive personality, to go to the bad in that particular way, rather than becoming dark and brooding.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying?
Yeah. Yeah, I did like how Timothée Chalamet, like, did that change. But then once Laurie turned back to normal in the 1994 version, it was like, okay, I mean, everything's fine again.
It's just we have no idea how he got here.
Well, because Amy reformed him.
Off screen.
Off screen, yes.
I thought they did a good job with that in the 2019 movie, actually. I really like the scene where she kind of tells him what he needs to hear.
Yeah, that was one thing that the script and the actors did better in the newer movie. Well, and actually, I saw the 1994 movie before I even read the book. So I always thought that was very weird, and that's just the way things were, until I read the book, and I was like, wow, I can actually see this. Like, this is very realistic, and also, like, it seems like the right thing to happen. But from seeing that movie, I always thought it was strange. Okay, so what do you think about Jo's rejection of Laurie? And do you think that was the right decision? Literally everyone I know is like, they should have been together. I have no idea. And I think the newer movie helped everyone realize that, like, the way things turned out were the way they were supposed to be. But, like, I always knew, even from the 1994 movie, that, like, it just wouldn't be right if they met. Like, they were those types of friends where they were great friends, but, like, Like she was saying, like, we would just fight all the time. And he was like, no, we wouldn't. We wouldn't. And she's like, you can't even propose without fighting. And he was like, look, I will do. What did he say? Unless provoked.
She said neither of us can keep our tempers, and he said, I can, unless provoked.
Yeah. And it's like, see, they have great chemistry. They're like a great conversation, but it's.
Yeah, I can see that. I mean, I like Jo and Frederick's relationship quite well, and it works as a romance.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm not, like, mad. I don't think I would have been mad if she'd gotten together with Laurie either. Honestly, I've always understood Jo's point of view very strongly. Like, I don't want to marry at all. Like, stop trying to hurry me into this thing that's not interesting to me. I'm not ready for. Definitely not ready for it with you. She's not interested in marriage at all, and it's partly because she hasn't found the right person yet. But it's also partly because she's like a young woman and she is working on other things. You know?
Yeah, she's tried to get her career underway.
She's trying to get her career underway. She's trying to just be friends with people. And not that Laurie can help that he falls in love with her, but she also can't help that she's not in love with him. And this isn't what she's ready for at this point in her life.
Yeah. At least my family, a lot of them have, like, expressed dislike of Friedrich and Jo's relationship because they thought it was weird. And again, the transition wasn't the best. Mostly because I think they wanted to focus more on other things like Beth's death than the transition between all these different things that takes a lot of time.
Yeah, when he takes her to the opera and starts translating the opera for her and then starts quoting the opera very softly and lovey-dovey to her. And then she turns her head and they almost kiss. And then someone comes backstage and clangs the cymbals. And they laugh self-consciously, and then they actually kiss.
Yeah.
It was a weird scene.
Very cliche, very cheesy. I don't know. That movie did so many things so right, and that was not one of them.
Yeah. It also just seemed like too soon in the story.
Yeah. Yeah, the whole relationship between Friedrich and Jo felt very rushed in the movie. But I think Friedrich and Jo went together quite well, actually. And I could see how they would be a better, like, match for marriage than Jo and Laurie, just as far as the maturity level and Friedrich's, like, interest in things like writing, like what she was into.
Although I didn't necessarily love... In the book it was a little different, and in the movie it was more like, well, why are you writing sensational stories of fantasy? Your gifts lie in a much more noble direction, which is to write realistic fiction.
Mm-hmm.
It was kind of weird how they treated that, like that's not really how the book treated it. Like, why was he such a snob about her writing fantasy?
I don't think it was purely that he was just like, oh, this isn't, like, up your alley, this isn't your full potential. I think it was more that he, like, disapproved of, like, vampires and corpses and killing and all this stuff. It was like this isn't the purest stuff.
Well, no, I get that, like, okay, if I just fill it in with what happened in the book, I'm fine with it. But the way they phrased everything, it's like his ultimate point was, with your talents, you could do so much more. Not that he thinks it's morally a bad thing to write about the fantasy elements, but that he thinks it's a waste of her talents, as if it's inherently a worse genre.
Right.
That was the way they framed it in the movie, it felt to me.
Yeah, I would agree with that.
Well, and so I don't like that.
I don't know. It seems good to me. How do you perceive it in the book?
I perceive it in the book as he finds her writing kind of lurid, unhealthily sensational things.
Mm.
And she could write much more honestly and much more edifyingly. It's not that her talents are such that she should not waste them on such an inferior genre as fantasy, and should instead apply them to the noble art of writing realistic books about people having dinner. It's more of a moral issue in the book, and I understand that.
Yeah.
But when it becomes just like this judgment of fantasy as an inferior genre inherently.
See, and actually I think Louisa May Alcott wrote this in, like, the same concept with the men in their lives, like, being good people. The same thing happened with Meg and Laurie at the ball, where she was, like, wearing a slightly revealing dress. And it's like, I don't even think wearing a dress like that is bad. And I don't think I would think that even if I lived in the time period. But it's just, like, the marches have this standard, and the men admired that and kind of like wanted to live up to that in their own lives. And when they saw the girls slipping from that at all, it was like them calling out. It wasn't even more about specifically about the thing itself. It's just like, no, this is who you are. Be who you are, you know?
I see that. I like that.
Yeah. So that's kind of how I saw it. And it really was the exact same instance, even though the circumstances were different with both situations. Because both men came back around and were like, I'm sorry. I don't think I should have called you out in the way I did. But at the same time, I don't really think I was wrong. And the girl was like back, oh, like, I'm sorry too. And also, like, I accept your apology. And I don't know, it was great both times. Okay, so.
Okay, the last couple is Meg and John Brooke.
Yes. I love this topic so much. Okay, I really, really like the John Brooke in this movie. I know you think he's the worst, but the John Brooke in the in the book, he just seemed like a good guy. Didn't have much of a personality. Definitely wasn't a main point of the book.
I don't know. He didn't seem lacking in personality to me just because he's not dashing or romantic or a German immigrant. He still had a personality just because he's kind of a basic, nice American guy. I like his character in the book, and in this movie, he's this weird guy who wears gloves and has longish red hair, and you first are introduced to him in this like frilly coat and wearing sunglasses and being like, oh, haha, haha, oh, they threw a snowball at me. Oh, I just hate it.
Okay.
Like and he's so awkward and pathetic, and he's not like that in the book. I can see that since you watched the movie first, this was the first version of the character that you liked, and so
the book version was like, this is not the John Brooke I know.
Right, and that's how I am about the movie version. Okay, the other thing though is with the movie version, why in heaven's name would Meg fall in love with this guy?
That's a very fair point. I will say I don't disagree. I don't think that like, it's completely off the table because Meg is very concerned with politeness, and that's right up John Brooke's alley. I love the conversations between him and Laurie about females. He's literally the best. But his awkwardness, like, I guess he could be compared to the awful Friedrich in the newer movie, but he's still so much better. His awkwardness is very endearing.
Sure. But not fall in love with Worthy.
I can see how Meg could be one of the very few people on the planet who would just, like, figure out a way to connect with this guy.
Fine. Just in the book, he has a strength.
He's kind of controlling in the book. I didn't really like him in the book.
You were just telling me that he didn't have a personality. Now all of a sudden he's controlling.
Yes.
And I'm not saying he's my favorite character. I'm just saying that he's a character who has strength of will and strength of personality. And I just can't see Meg falling in love with someone who doesn't have that strength. Whether you want to call that strength a good thing or a bad thing, I just can't see Meg being attracted to someone who doesn't possess it.
I will say it was a very odd match between them, but it was hilarious. So then the debate, is Little Women a Christmas story?
Short debate, yes.
I agree with you. I think it is. Even though, like, it's not a Christmas movie. It's like a lot of the story takes place during Christmas time. It was released on Christmas Day.
Starts out during Christmas time? Yeah. No, it starts out at Christmas. The first half ends at another Christmas. And so at least the first half of the story is a Christmas story. The second half is sadder.
Yeah. It's mostly just like the setting and the feel of it. It's very Christmassy, I feel like. And the marches are like a Christian family, so you know, there's like Christian themes in it.
Well, I don't know if they're a Christian family. Like, are they supposed to be Christian or are they supposed to be transcendentalist?
I thought they were a Christian family.
So, like, the transcendentalists, they sound Christian, but they're not like what I would define as Christian. Even though they say a lot of the same things and have a lot of the same ideas, it's a bit different. Like,
well, yeah, I
did you have to read
be a transcendentalist and not be a Christian.
Well, okay, so I'm saying, was the family Christian or transcendentalist?
But that's what I'm saying. I feel like you could also be both.
No, okay. Transcendentalism is not a denomination like Catholicism and Baptists.
Oh, I know.
And Presbyterians.
It's like a philosophy of life.
Yeah.
Do you want to explain what transcendentalism is?
I don't know technically. Let me look up a definition.
Okay.
Okay, according to Wikipedia, Transcendentalism is a philosophical movement that developed in the late 1820s and 1830s in New England. A core belief is in the inherent goodness of people and nature, and while society and its institutions have corrupted the purity of the individual, people are at their best when truly self-reliant and independent. Transcendentalists saw divine experience inherent in the everyday, rather than believing in a distant heaven. They're basically like, they co-opt a bunch of Christian phrases because they grew out of Christian 1800s New England.
Christian morals,
and
Christian
say, but
concepts.
actually what these things mean is,
Be a good
like
person.
the divinity. Yeah, kind of like that. And also like a bunch of philosophical mumbo-jumbo about the divine in the this and the that. Like Henry David Thoreau, if you read Walden, that's a transcendentalist work. Or Ralph Emerson's essays. And I'm pretty sure Louisa May Alcott's father was at least into transcendentalism. And I don't know if her mom was more of a regular Christian or what, but she definitely grew up influenced by that philosophy. And this movie talked about it at one point. It brought several like issues of the day that were important to Louisa May Alcott into the storyline, it seemed to me. Like, the rights of women and stuff. And also transcendentalism. They talked about it for a second.
Yeah.
Which I enjoyed that.
From your understanding of transcendentalism, would you say the main difference between the philosophy and, like, Christian doctrine is basically, like, transcendentalism focuses more on being a good person, like pulling yourself up by your own bootstraps kind of a thing? Like, everything is about your character. That's the main goal. Whereas from a biblical standpoint, it's more like, okay, God's more doing a lot of the work in you through faith by grace. And yes, you need to focus on your character because that's really important, but it's not like that's like the end of all,
Yeah. They kind of do the same things, transcendentalists and Christians, but with different understandings of why and how.
Mm-hmm. So as far as the feminism in this movie, I think they did a really good job. And I agreed, like, and I was glad you appreciated it as well, because like I always thought like and it wasn't like a main focus of the movie, but it was brought up in different ways at different points, and it wasn't like in your face like it was more in the more modern version.
The more modern version, the feminism in that movie frustrates me deeply. Like, so people say things, but they're just strawmen, and also they like exaggerate things. But in this movie, like, it's a real issue that it's easier to lose your character, like your reputation as a woman, than as a man, and that you have fewer career options open to you, and that young women are expected to stay inside more often, and as Marmee says, bend over their needlework and wear restrictive corsets. I love Marmee. She's great. She says that kind of thing, and she tells her girls...
Yeah, explain the outburst that she had with John Brooke.
It was really funny. He was standing there watching his charge, Laurie, play with her younger girls. They were having like a snowball fight, and he's like, "Oh, he's such a lively... Your daughters are so lively, Mrs. March." And she says, "Yes."
And you got to include the part where he was like, "I was hoping they would be a good influence to rein in Laurie's recklessness."
And then a snowball hits him. Yeah. No, she just kind of bursts out with like, "Well, actually, I think that girls are not really much different from boys in their need to play healthily outdoors and not be expected to stay inside and bend over needlework all the time and wear restrictive corsets." And he's like, oh, yes, quite. And she turns away, and her daughter, Meg, is like, "Mom, do you have to talk about corsets every single time?"
Well, and she brought up the fact that, like, a lot of women were in very poor health, and they would have fainting spells, and, like, they were just super frail because of the lifestyle they were expected to live.
Yeah, it's not because they're inherently more unhealthy.
Yeah. I'm like, that's a good point.
But just in general, she didn't whine about the plight of women. She let her girls understand that this is the way it is, and you guys need to go change it if you can.
Yeah.
And you need to have an awareness of what it is, and you need to think about it clearly. Like when Jo makes her argument that suffrage for women because women are angels and men are animals is a terrible argument and not the point of suffrage. Like, just everything like that. Or even, like, a random issue like Meg objecting to silk because of the silk mills using child labor. It was all very natural to the time, respectful of what Louisa May Alcott would have thought, and it just fit in well, and I agreed with it even.
Yeah.
Which was great, as compared to the 2019 movie, where it's all like, if I'm a woman, I can't even own property or support myself ever, and women should stay in their place and be seen and not heard, and like the editor guy being like over the top with his sexism against Jo, and the random scene where Marmee was like, sometimes I'm ashamed of my country, with her face scrunched and her hands wringing, of course. And it was like, wait, why are you ashamed of your country? Like, I'm confused.
Well, okay, because, like, in the 1994 movie where Jo has her little, like, the men are around discussing women's suffrage and voting and if women should be able to vote or not, some of the men were like, yeah, I mean, like, women can vote, there's just not much use for it, like, I don't even understand it. And, like, someone was like, I mean, if she has a husband, there's, like, literally no point, And she made that argument where she was like, okay, but, like, at the end of the day, we're all human beings, like, women should have rights because they are equal with men, not because, like, the whole argument of the angels versus monsters thing. She didn't give a long speech. She wasn't, like, mad. She was just, like, kind of engaging in the
Participating
conversation.
in their discussion.
And they were all listening to her and like, oh, yeah, that's a good point, Jo was out there, like, making enough, being a babysitter to live, also trying to get her career underway as a writer, making money, not enough to live off of, but she was making money and she was making headway. And yeah, she changed her name to be like Joseph March, to be a man, but you could see like her wrestling with the issue and still making her way in the world. And it was very apparent that she wasn't helpless and that she, like, women like her were changing the culture.
Finish it up quick. Say the ending things.
Okay. Thank you for listening to the Two Retired Homeschoolers. If you have any book or movie requests, feel free to submit them to our email at tworetiredhomeschoolers@gmail.com. So 2 weeks from now, we're actually going to be reviewing the book of Little Women. Did the movie first.
By the way, you say woman funny, not me.
Rebecca says woman, and I say woman.
You're saying woman. You keep saying woman.
That's how you say it, woman. You say woman.
Woman.